I want to kind of switch gears and talk a little bit about measurement of sustainability, and how a company measures sustainability, how it varies from brand to brand, and what factors are considered when you're setting your own standards for measurement.
So I briefly worked for an environmental nonprofit called CDP, and that is entirely focused on the disclosure of environmental data of the world's largest businesses. And really capturing what your carbon footprint is and putting that into a valuation metric that is sort of utilized by their investors to long term from an economic standpoint as well as an environmental standpoint. And when I set out to found Knickey, I was really lending from that background and wanting to really communicate transparently to our stakeholders and our suppliers, vendors, partners, as well as our customers, what initiatives we are trying to tackle as a company and what standards we're holding ourselves to. And so from the outset, we really partnered with suppliers that are certified. We're fully certified throughout the entire supply chain through, fair trade, Ecotex, and the Global Organic Textile Standard. And then beyond that, we have really, we actually pulled a lot of our stakeholders to do a materiality and risk assessment to understand what are the key components of the business that you care about. And a lot of people care about recycling. And we set out to make, to really address the circularity issue as our role as part of, manufacturing a fashion item. And so we conducted this assessment, which was really insightful, and then actually built out an impact report for our first year in business, which was 2019. And so you can actually go onto our website and read about what our findings were. Our biggest impact was actually in consumer use of our goods, which is typically the case with apparel, and that is due to laundering, whether you launder on hot or you put it in the dryer. And so this year we're actually really focused on education around laundering practices and trying to, again, re-educate and setting goals for ourselves as a company in terms of what our footprint is and how we can make that smaller and more efficient, and also really gearing up our recycling program because that does defer quite a bit of textile waste from the landfill in terms of emissions as well as textile waste. So yeah, we're really into measurement and we love to share that. So any questions about it, I'm happy to field.
And I think that's so important too, because the term sustainability, right? Like you ask 100 people, what does sustainability mean? And you're going to get 100 different answers, I'm sure. So this is actually a great question for us too, because I've been really trying to focus on like, how do you put metrics to what it is that we're doing? And there's so many different ways to go about it. So we actually brought on a consultant semi-recently that's been working with us to really evaluate our carbon footprint through, our fiber and also throughout our entire supply chain, which is actually very limited because we're just within 10 miles. But as a company, we're really focused on toxicology and what that looks like when you are looking at conventional clothing as well as synthetics, and you're thinking about pesticides and chemicals that, are so detrimental to humans as well as the environment. Like that's really what is sort of driving me, that I feel like this is the topic that isn't really communicated yet in this space. So we're sort of trying to work on a clean score. So Dress Clean is sort of our saying and our initiative that we launched in 2018. And we're trying to basically look at water usage, energy, and then also toxicology, and across the board like for all of our products to figure out a clean score that can be consumer facing. So hopefully that will be like a better indication of how sustainable our products are. So we're trying to figure out the rating system right now. It's either going to be like a 1 through 5 or A through F in terms of what's great and what's not. But I totally agree that I think like metrics is something that is definitely needed, and definitions, especially within the sustainability space.
Yeah, that's great. I can kind of unpack this a little bit on how we've tackled it, and the things that we've already done and the foundation that we've laid, and how we've kind of measured things, and then sort of where we're headed in the next year or so. But our big focus here when we started was kind of having a foundation of what we wanted to tackle, what we wanted to approach, and what sort of metrics we wanted to meet, and what those values were, right? And what we were sourcing, the energy and carbon that it took to produce products, shipping, logistics, fulfillment, and then also like recapture. And so what was really important to us is at the beginning of the supply chain, working with and vetting with initial partners that had LCAs on their products, that were ISO certified, that we could trust. And what was nice was that we were able to vet these two with other suppliers, or other companies that use them as suppliers as well, whether that was Patagonia or Stella or someone along those. And then worked really closely with our individual factory partners to making sure that they were up to standards. And what was nice is they were a larger factory and had already done it for other brands too. And so we were able to kind of leverage that existing information, and be really deliberate about it. And then from that, begin seeking out individual partnerships within people within the industry, whether it's the Sustainable Apparel Coalition or Textile Exchange or the Ethical Trading Initiative, and making sure that we were bringing in other partners to help start to validate kind of our findings in our supply chain. Where we're headed, and I'm really, really excited to hear that both of you guys are thinking about this as well, is doing a full LCA and doing it from fiber all the way through manufacturing to recapture and reintegration, and figuring out not only the carbon footprint of the company, but then also the individual carbon footprint of every product, and making sure that we've mapped that kind of from tip to tail.
Something to quickly call out here, and probably a lot of you know this because you work in the industry, but LCA is the gold standard, so to do a full life cycle analysis. So we have that budgeted for next year. But as an upstart, a really early brand, that's expensive. That's $100,000 a year. And that's a lot to ask the newer, smaller brands that are the ones generally pushing a lot of this innovation and new material testing and et cetera. And so it's easy for a bigger holding company to run an LCA annually, but hard again to when you're upstart or Maple Label, when you're just started from vintage teas and now you're starting your first factory relationships in 2018. And so what Stuart was kind of walking through is how we initially handled sourcing was we had a fantastic advisory board, and we were really working closely with mills that were paying for material level LCAs and then fiber tracing. So we've almost put together our own LCA, and now we're working with a consultant partner that's helping us turn that into actual customer facing data, so that you can see how much carbon you've saved by buying or wearing a 1,000 shoe versus Stan Smith. Because we didn't have kind of larger industry metrics. And so those are teams like Green Story, that's a fantastic team that helps you kind of turn that into customer facing data. And then where we're headed is actually budgeting annually for our own LCA.